Hey, everybody. Fascinating chat today with NinjaOne, who are helping keep IT simple, fast, and sane with Egan. Egan, how are you?
I'm good, Evan. How are you?
Good to see you again. We last met in Orlando at the Gartner Expo. That was
We
quite a
did.
blockbuster event for you guys. Before that, maybe how would you describe NinjaOne these days and your team and mission
Yeah,
within the
yeah,
company?
yeah. NinjaOne really, if we want to boil it down into our essence, you can think of NinjaOne as sort of that next generation enterprise IT endpoint management solution. So taking things that I think historically have required a lot of legacy tooling and a lot of people and a lot of coordination, and really simplifying it to the point that it can be owned and operated by a very small team at very, very large scale. And really just trying to make an impact in the industry where there's been a lot of legacy cruff accumulated over the years, and just trying to change that for folks.
Indeed. And you guys are making, huge impact. Let's talk about the marketplace at the moment. Autonomous AI agents are
Yeah,
everywhere.
yeah.
Sounds great on slideware, but you guys are actually in the field helping clients. What does practical AI, if I could call it that, actually look like in the real world with real
Yeah,
customers today?
yeah, it's a great question, Evan. I think that we owe it to our customers to be very transparent, very honest about how we're applying AI to solving problems that they care about, as opposed to how are we applying AI to our marketing budget. I mean, let's just be honest. You see a lot of that across the industry, no matter what vertical you're in. It's a great way to attract investment and things like that. We have taken the approach with AI that AI is incredibly good at acting as a force multiplier, a race
Mm.
with technology, if you will. Um, and it really lends itself very, very well to solving some very specific problems that have plagued the endpoint market for a long time. And so, kind of some of those key areas are around where we have applied them specifically are around things like patch sentiment, right? It's Patch Tuesday. There's a truckload of patches that get backed up to your front door and dumped in your lap, and you've got to sort through those and figure out how you're going to deploy, how you're going to push those out in rings and things. Um, but I also want to know, just sort of in general, how's this going? Not only how's it going across, keeping in mind we've got 35,000 plus customers out there. You're talking about tens and tens and tens of millions of patches being pushed out that we can monitor the efficacy and the success rate and those sorts of things. So we have this treasure trove of data that we want to sort of make available and turn into knowledge for our customers. At the same time, we want to go out and harvest sentiment data from across the public, right? So
Mm.
there are lots of sources for that. There's lots of places where people go and start complaining loudly when things start going wrong. And so we want to surface that kind of information in a meaningful way in very close to real time. That processing data at that scale and turning that sort of unstructured data into something meaningful for people is perfectly suited for AI, right? Another great example is around asset management data, sort of the thing that has plagued the endpoint world for decades. I mean, I can remember going back multiple decades, being responsible for software asset management in a very, very large organization. The number of times that we tried and failed to sort of automate that and ended up back with clipboards and pencils, so to speak, more times than I care to count. That data cleansing, making sure that the data you're collecting and putting into your system of authority, if it's an external system, a CMDB, something like that, again, very, very well suited for applying AI to solving that problem, as opposed to requiring an army of people behind the scenes to solve that problem, which is sort of what the industry's done over the years. Those are two very small examples, but if you can crack either or both of those problems, you have just dramatically changed for the positive the day-to-day life of the people responsible for those things in the endpoint management world. As we apply AI, we are being very particular and very pragmatic in making sure that it's not a sticker on a box, so to speak, that we're actually solving the problems that are causing our customers a lot of pain. So hopefully that makes sense. If there's anything in that you'd like to dig into, I'm happy to talk about anything, man. I enjoy talking about this stuff. So
obviously your enthusiasm is infectious. And well, let's talk about where we stand today as you think about AI at NinjaOne today in January 2026. Where is that line between helpful automation and kind of risky overreach? And where will that line maybe shift over time?
Yeah, I think the industry as a whole is a long way from handing the reins to full automation. I, as much as the next person, hope that day comes, but today we can't. And it is as much a technical limitation as it is a legal and liability limitation, right? You can't just turn over control like that. There has to be a human in the loop for a lot of this stuff. And that's true both for vendors, but also for the IT shops at large organizations or in government or wherever you happen to find them. So for today, I think the focus for the next few years at least is going to be on improving that race with technology, making sure that we take the things that are very, very time consuming, turn over the portions of those things that are sort of rote to AI, to full automation, and then having a human in the loop to validate, check the work, go back, tweak things, and then validate. And maybe you allow the AI to create the new policy or create the package that's going to be pushed, but you still have a human validating that. That's far, far less work. If you think about that, go back to that patch sentiment example that I gave. If you think about that from the perspective of the way we have done those things historically, we scream test, right? And you have a change management board. That change management board meets, you do a scream test on your first push, you come back, change management board, everybody gets quiet, you listen, figuratively speaking, make sure phones don't start ringing and that sort of thing, right? So it induces this sort of latency. That's the sort of thing we can very confidently automate out of the process. Right. What we can't do is say full end to end, I'm just going to turn this thing over and AI is going to troubleshoot it to completion and close the ticket. Are there situations where that might be true? Yes. If we see a problem and it's a repeatable problem and it has a very finite set of variables associated with it, those sorts of things, sure, those are sort of the early low-hanging fruit that we can go after with full automation. And we're happy to do that. And we are implementing capabilities to do that on a daily basis. I think it's the higher complexity issues, which are really, frankly, if we're honest with ourselves, it's those high complexity things that the highly trained staff sitting in the IT shops should be focused on. So.
AI is changing the game of business. Will you be on the winning team? I'm Jordan Wilson, the host of the Everyday AI podcast and your coach to help you learn the X's and O's of AI. Artificial intelligence isn't just a new player in the game, it's a new sport altogether. So if you don't quickly put AI into play, your competitors will run up the score. I've spent my whole life building winning teams, from coaching basketball to working with big players like Nike and Jordan Brand. My next move? Helping you win with Everyday AI. Listen wherever you get your podcasts or on everydayaipodcast.com. Let's tap into AI together and put points on the board.
Brilliant. And you have a unique background in the public sector as well. Tell us a little bit about that and why 2026 is sort of being labeled as a turning point in the public sector. What's happening under the hood in DC and elsewhere?
So it's, every year is a turning point, right? Public sector, for as long as I've been involved in it, which is coming up on 35 years, public sector has always tried to increase that sort of public-private partnership around technology. And each year they chip away at the problem. It's a hard thing to do. And I do have a lot of empathy for the folks in government whose job that is. I've been there, I've been in that seat, and I understand just how difficult it is because you have to balance politics and policy with progress. And it's just a really difficult line to toe. What we are seeing is increases in efficiency that allow the faster but still responsible adoption of new technology. And so you on the DoD side, they have what we refer to as impact level authorizations, sort of a certification process, if you want to think of it that way. I'm always hesitant to use that word because it is not a certification. And, if you're in that world, people are very adamant about that. But that's the closest analog that people in the private sector would understand as you go through this process to get sort of certified to operate at a particular impact level. And that means that your platform or your security as a vendor is good enough that government can adopt it, right? On the civilian side of the U.S. government, we have what's called FedRAMP. There is reciprocity between those two things. It historically has been an incredibly protracted, expensive, painful, difficult process that frankly has raised the barrier of entry so high in some cases that a lot of software companies just don't do it. It's too much. It's especially true if you put yourselves in the shoes of a startup. That's a hard pill to swallow to say, hey, I need you to invest $3 million in 2 years, and then maybe we'll buy your stuff, right? If you get in the marketplace. On the civilian side, they've done a really good job of streamlining that. They have a new process that you can go through with FedRAMP. It's still sort of in beta right now, but it can take that down from I'd say, if you wanted like finger in the wind average, take you down from 18 months to 3 to 4 months, right?
Wow.
That's a big deal. Like that's a huge deal for a company like us, right? And frankly, any software company. There is some talk that right now that's for FedRAMP moderate. They want to adopt that at the FedRAMP high level. There is some implied reciprocity between FedRAMP and impact levels. So, federal civilian and federal defense. And then there's also some talk that on the defense side that they may adopt a similar approach to the impact level authorizations. So a lot is still in flight. Not everything is fully detailed out, but I think the important thing is that we're seeing a tremendous amount of progress. And if you go back to that, the timeline compression that we saw with FedRAMP moderate under this new program, if that plays out across FedRAMP high and starts in the lower impact levels and works its way up, that's going to be transformative for the U.S. government. It's going to allow them truly to adopt new technology at a pace that's much closer to the way the private sector can, as opposed to always being a decade behind on things.
Brilliant. A hint of optimism here.
Yeah.
Something we don't hear talk too much about. Shifting gears, I've heard you talk about Digital Operations Center. This theme keeps coming up. What problem is trying to be solved here? Is this a new name, or are we really rethinking operations?
I'm not a buzzword person at all, and I think folks who know me know that. I don't really concern myself with sort of what's in the zeitgeist of marketing terminology. My marketing department is probably wishes I would do a little more of that. The reality is it's very simple, honestly, Evan. It boils down to budgets. We, the vendors, we, the private sector, we, the government, we, the people, so to speak, have to find ways to operate more efficiently. Anytime you can sort of centralize those operations, and that doesn't have to mean geographically. It doesn't have to mean it can take on different meanings. But the more that we can centralize those kinds of operations and do the same thing that we have to do today with fewer resources, and those resources could be raw dollars, they could be systems, they could be the number of pieces of tooling and platforms that we need to use to be able to accomplish the task, or the number of people involved, the better, right? That is an improvement for everyone. The reality, though, is what we have to accomplish isn't static. And I think that's the part that we have tended to miss historically, is we sort of pick a point in time and say, okay, how do I do this with less things, right? And once we get that figured out, it's like, oh, holy smokes. In the meantime, we added 20% to that workload that we hadn't accounted for when we did this. So that if you want to think of it in sort of the way that I'm thinking of it, it is how do we have sort of a continuous approach to that? How do we look at what we have to do today how that's going to change, whether it's regulatory or whether it's just the realities of the world that we live in and the threats that we face and the way that the end user environment is changing. And a great example of that would be if you go back, call it 5 years, maybe 6 years. And this is true periodically, right? You and I have been around doing this long enough. We've heard this multiple times. It's like, hey, the traditional endpoint is dead. The traditional endpoint has been dead half a dozen times. The reality is 5 years ago, if you look at the average number of nodes, endpoints, devices, whatever you want to call it per user, it was half what it is today. So not only is the traditional endpoint not dead, like it is now fragmenting into more sort of use case specific devices, whether it be a laptop or a traditional server or a VM or a phone or a tablet or multiple phones and tablets, right? Those all change the calculus on what is the tooling we need, how many people do we need, that sort of thing. And so when I talk about this, what I'm saying is, look, we need to consolidate for today, but we also need that consolidation to work 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now. Otherwise, we're going to be right back where we were. Does that make sense?
No, it totally does. And it sounds like IT and security teams are beginning to sit down at the same table. Are you seeing that in the field? Is that a real trend?
It is. I'll say we are narrowing that divide, I think. I think back, to 10, 15 years ago, the relationship between ops and security was once a month, the security team would come by and drop a 300-page PDF on the ops guy's desk and say, here's all your deficiencies, right? It's great that you just ran your monthly patch cycle. Here's all the things you didn't get, right? And fine, like that natural tension is a good thing, but it's not tremendously productive to have sort of that 30-day cycle to making sure that we're secure, because you never really reach secure in that way. So I think what we're seeing is as you reduce the lag time to detect and respond holistically, and that can mean everything from patching to software distribution, software removal, right? Like there's all sorts of facets to that blend between operations and security. Well, the closer you get to being able to understand and react to that in real time, the more closely you need those two teams working together, right? And so I think really what we're seeing is a sort of a collectivism between the operations and the security side of the house. There's two distinctly separate teams still, but they're working more in cooperation and orchestration with one another than they are at odds with one another, which is what we saw more a decade or so ago. So it's again, like it's wonderful progress. It's something that we should be celebrating and saying, okay, what did we do right that enabled this, and let's do more of that. And I think that's really where our focus is.
Brilliant. So resilience seems to be one of the key themes for this year as well, not just for organizations, professionals, but also for infrastructure and networks. What does that mean in 2026? What are some of the key tenets of a resilient infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, it really boils down to understanding, of course, what you have, which always sounds a little cliche, but we still struggle with it. So if it's true, it's not cliche. Let's just, let's be honest with ourselves. We struggle to understand what we have, what state it's in, sort of that user experience impact of those variables. The way that you better enable ensuring, I'll use the performant as a substitute for resilient here, right? Because as an end user, I view resilience as, is this performant or not, right? Can I do my job? Are the tools that I need to rely on, are they working? Are they working at the speed that I need them to, so that the tools that I'm using are not slowing me down? Ultimately, they should speed me up at best, but certainly not slow me down. That requires a lot of instrumentation, and that instrumentation has to cross multiple devices. And I'm using the term device there very loosely, because that device could also be a service, a SaaS service of some kind in the cloud that your physical device is connecting to. At the end of the day, it's the whole is greater than the sum of the parts scenario, where I need that whole set of things to work in orchestration with one another and be performant so that I, as the end user, can do my job and do it efficiently. And so from our perspective, as a vendor doing what we do, that begins with instrumentation and discovery. And then that instrumentation is the data that we're collecting from that instrumentation needs to be turned into actionable information to the administrator so that they can then take the steps necessary to keep that performance level where it is. Ensure that it's good. If it isn't, understand why, and very quickly take action to remediate that. Doing that's a lot easier than it used to be. Thankfully for us, right? The challenges that we used to face as an industry, which were, terribly underperformant networks, endpoints that were fully saturated, right? Things got faster over the years. And so now that speed and scale problem isn't so much the problem anymore. Now it's how easily can I do my job, right? I can communicate with the endpoints just fine. Everything's fast now, including, I can have gigabit connections to my cell phone if I need to. So now it becomes, how easy is the tooling to use? How consolidated is that tooling? In other words, do I have to jump between one tool to another, depending on the piece of that, the piece part of that whole that I need to address, or can I do it all from one place? And I really feel like what we at Ninja have done is we have really cracked the nut on how do I remain under this one umbrella and be able to instrument, monitor, and action across the totality of that environment so that I don't have to go outside this ecosystem to make a change, if that makes sense.
It does, and I think your results are showing that.
Yeah.
Looking ahead, I mean, IT operations are perpetually behind the curve, trying to catch up, it seems. But, what's one or two things that teams should be preparing for maybe next quarter, maybe next year to get ahead of the curve?
Yeah, I think we're going to see some significant change in the mobile market moving forward. We're already seeing that in terms of consolidation, like Google's making a move to do some significant consolidation among their, they have multiple families of mobile devices. MDM is going to, I think we're going to see absolutely explosive growth in the demand for not only for MDM in general, but for a very rapid maturation within the MDM market. MDM vendors are going to be expected to really step up to the plate because it has become like it's no longer a nice to have in the industry. There's just too much dependency on mobile devices, and the ability to manage onboard, offboard those devices very efficiently and very safely, frankly, because not only are they a hard and fast requirement now, they also represent they're sort of the Wild West that the traditional endpoint used to be. And that's like, we can't do that. We can't reintroduce that kind of risk into our environments that we spent so many decades trying to get rid of. So.
Brilliant. Yeah, as I head into Mobile World Congress, Barcelona next month, I'm sure that will be a big topic in the enterprise. Where are you headed? What are you up to? Where can people meet you over the next weeks and months?
Oh, my goodness, man. That's a great question. So I do spend most of my time in front of customers, with customers, trying to live and understand the pain. You'll, over the next few weeks, Germany, Japan, all over the place. I do hit some of the shows. I will admit that that's not like my primary goal is to spend time with the customer in their world. Obviously, with the Gartner MQ that came out, that was extremely powerful news for us. Our first year eligible and to be as it's fantastic. I just I'm very, very proud of that. I do hope I'm if I'm 100% honest, we just did our F1 sponsorship and announced that. Not going to lie. Hopefully, one of my stops in the next year will be at the paddock at a race. But we'll see. We'll see where things take us.
So much fun and interesting, insightful stuff to explore. Hope we'll see you at RSAC. And thanks for sharing the insights and the analysis. Really helpful, really interesting.
Always a pleasure, Evan. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And thanks, everyone, for listening, watching. Check out our TV show now on Fox Business and Bloomberg at techimpact.tv. And I'll see you at Mobile World Congress, RSA, hymns, and on and on. Take care, everyone. Thanks, Egan.
Thank you.